Bismillah, salatu wassalam ala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to something very unique, exciting, and very important, and extremely significant. First of all, about 30 years ago, at exactly around the time that we are now sitting here and looking into an event that was so significant that the United Nations actually declared the 11th of July the day of the massacre, and clearly the name is genocide, the genocide of the Bosniak people in Europe. Muslim Slavic people who live in the Balkan Peninsula. Many might not know that Islam in Europe is actually a real thing. It is not something new, it's not something that doesn't exist, it's something that is extremely important to realize, that we have Islam in Europe, we have Muslims, European Muslims, who have been living in Europe all their life, since the beginning of Islam. And we have to understand that Islam is not a new phenomenon here. It's not some kind of guest workers or factory workers who came in the 1960s or 70s and settled somewhere in the Balkan Peninsula. These were people, indigenous people, Slavic people, Albanian people, Greek people, Turkish people, who actually embraced the faith, especially with the arrival of the Ottoman Empire. So it is not a new phenomenon, it's not something that came recently, it's not something that is new to this continent, not at all. And we're going to talk now about something extremely important that happened to these very people. The very, very European people who have been Muslims for centuries on this continent, the Bosnian Muslims. A new country that developed out of Yugoslavia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, which actually showed a spiritual rebirth, okay? Something that we have to understand is extremely important for us Muslims here in Europe. Now, if we take a look, trying to figure out. If we take a look at the Balkan Peninsula, okay, we know that Islam came to the Balkan Peninsula and to Europe through various ways. Many say, okay, it's the Ottomans who came, the Ottoman Empire, they brought Islam, but it's not entirely true. If we're looking into what Islam actually came to do in the Balkan Peninsula and in Europe, especially the southern part of Europe, we see that the Ottomans actually stabilized Islam. They didn't bring Islam. Islam was already present, especially in what is nowadays the Balkan Peninsula, in countries of Bosnia or in Albania or even in Greece. Islam was present, but it was stabilized by the Ottoman Empire, which came as an empire. So the Ottomans, when they came, they brought Islam, more of Islam, and they stabilized Islam, especially in countries that nowadays make a major part of the Balkan Peninsula. So Bosnia-Herzegovina, Albania, Kosovo, Greece, and so on. If you're looking at certain peoples, there are certain peoples in the Balkan Peninsula who we consider Muslim peoples in Europe. Okay? First and outmost, the Albanian people. The Albanian people are not Slavic people. The Albanian people are simply Albanian. And they themselves don't actually know where they come from originally. Okay? Originally, it's one of the oldest people living in Europe. And they embraced the faith with the arrival of the Ottoman Empire. Then we have the Slavic people. And the Slavic people, amongst them, are the Bosnian people. Okay? And then we have people such as the Turkish speakers, the Turkic people, okay, who we find nowadays in Turkey, in the country of Turkey. So you see, the Balkan Peninsula is actually a very, very important region in Europe, quite different to the rest of Europe. And it has always been a part which has received a very big importance of Islam. Whereas before the Ottoman Empire, there was another part which actually had seen Islam. Anybody, any idea which part? On the other side. We have that southeastern Europe, we have southwestern Europe. What about that? What was there before? Any idea? Where did the Muslims arrive before the Ottomans? Exactly, Al-Andalus, exactly, Spain, Portugal, even into France. And that was in the 8th century, 711. So the Muslims and Islam didn't come to Europe with the very first guest workers coming and working in factories in the UK or in France or in Germany. They came in 711. And from that time on, Muslims settled here in Europe and became European Muslims. We had Spanish, we had Portuguese, we had French, we had Italian, we had Greek Muslims. And in the end, we also had other Balkan Muslims, such as the Bosniaks. Okay? Now, here you see the importance of the Turkic tribes. First of all, we know, for the ones who know a little bit about history, and we're not going too deep into it, but if you look at Islam developing in the world from our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ over to the Khilafah Rashidin, the four, and then going over to the Umayyads and to the Abbasids. These are what we know mainly about Islam. But we don't really know that the Turkic people accepted Islam after the Arabs, okay? And they started developing dynasties such as the Seljuks, such as the Ottomans, and the Ottomans became a very big dynasty. Became so big that actually it played an important role here in Europe. And that's why in the Balkan Peninsula, you have nowadays Muslims that remained here, European Muslims, from the very beginning of the spread of Islam under the Ottoman Empire. Okay? We have enough time, inshallah, we're going to discuss this, inshallah, to go deeper into it. It is a big topic. Important to see is during the same time when the Ottomans spread, when the Turkic people became very big, there was another empire, actually the largest empire in the world, the Mongol Empire. The Mongols were not Muslims, at least not at the beginning. What did they do? In 1258, they destroyed Baghdad, and they massacred anything and anybody they found. So many people can say, oh, terrible people, right? People thought that time they were Gog and Magog, okay? They were terrible, yes. But what happened? Let's be very honest, because we have to be honest as Muslims in history also. We should not allow our enemies to tell history. We have to be honest and clear. The Mongols were not planning to attack the Muslim world. They were not planning to attack the Sultan in Baghdad or the Abbasids. But what happened? They sent out emissaries, which was very normal at the time. They sent out emissaries to go and inform the Sultan in Baghdad that they are standing outside, that they are ready, okay? And that the Mongols would attack them if they don't accept them as a power. What did the Sultan do? He beheaded them. There were two of them. He beheaded them. And that enraged, of course, the Mongol emperor. So you understand, nobody's telling us this. And as I said, we have to be honest. It was not a good thing what happened after that, of course. It was the destruction of the Abbasid Empire. It was the end, we thought. Everybody, Muslims thought that's the end of the world. Gog and Magog. But it was also their own fault. Because there was an unspoken law that nobody is allowed to touch the emissaries of another empire. So not only did they touch them, but they beheaded them. So it was not a good thing. Okay, and we have to be honest about this one. So when the Mongol Empire attacked Baghdad, the most important center in the Muslim world, 1258, it was a catastrophe that we have never seen before. So for a while again, people thought that was the end of the world, that was the end of the Muslim Empire, that was the end of the Arabs, that was the end of the Muslims. 1258, what happened after that? Any idea? What happened after that? What happened towards the end of the 13th century, just 30, 40 years later? Any idea? Exactly, the Ottomans, Jazakallah brother. The Ottomans came in 1299 actually, according to our Gregorian calendar, 1299, and they actually revived the empire. So the Turkic people, we owe them a lot, okay? I'm Greek, yeah? Don't forget that, I'm Greek, so I have a lot to say against them, but we have to understand that as Muslims, we owe the Turks and the Ottomans a lot. The Arab power had lost already. The Arabs had lost the power already 100, 200 years before. Okay? There was a lot that was not going on. So the Turkic people who came, they didn't just settle in Asia and in places such as in Bursa or Edirne even, but they went further into Europe. And that's when they opened also countries which nowadays are going to be discussed, Bosnia, Albania, North Macedonia, and so on. Now, if you look at the very beginning of the spread of the Ottoman Empire into Europe, the north of Europe, you see Edirne, Filibe, Sofia, Monastir, these are all cities in Europe. Nowadays, cities in northern Greece, okay, in countries such as in North Macedonia, or in Albania, or in Bulgaria. Okay? Very beginning, 1360, the very beginning of the Ottoman Empire. Okay? So 1300s, 1299, 1300, that's when the Ottoman Empire spread, and spread straight into Europe. The interest of the Ottomans was what? To fulfill the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, opening Constantinople. But they did not go straight to Constantinople. They did it more wiser, or more wisely, if you want to, than what the Arabs tried before, several times, and it didn't work out. They went from the other side. They came actually first to Europe, around Constantinople, and attacked Constantinople later. They didn't attack Constantinople from Asia. They attacked Constantinople from Europe. It was smart. That was smart. That was a smart move. The Ottomans divided Europe. Okay, I mean the Europe that they knew that time that was of importance, which was the Byzantine Empire. If you're looking at the Balkan Peninsula, that was the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine emperors, we know one of them was Heraclitus. Okay, we know that our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had sent out missions and letters to Heraclitus to accept Islam. And we also know that he was actually willing to accept Islam, but he was too scared because of his subjects, who would have most probably got rid of him. So the Byzantine Empire was the mightiest empire next to the Muslim Empire, the mightiest empire in the Christian world. And the capital was Constantinople. Constantinople, the capital of the Christians in Europe. And everybody wanted to gain a piece of Constantinople because it was one of the wealthiest, one of the most advanced cities in the world. So they divided Europe first into Rumeli, which is the southern part of Europe, so where nowadays we have Greece, Albania, Bulgaria, and Anatolia, which is nowadays Turkey, Minor Asia. Okay, another word for Turkey is Minor Asia, was Minor Asia. Okay? Now the Turkic people, where did they come from? Who were these Turkic people? If you look at one of them, the mightiest sultan who ever lived during the two Ottoman times was Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent was given a title, the Magnificent, not by his subjects. It was not his people who called him the Magnificent. It was the Christians, their enemies, the people who actually hated him. Unbelievable. Imagine somebody hates you and gives you the name, you are magnificent. What kind of person must he have been? And we all agree, in history you will find that Sultan Suleiman, together with many others before him, was actually one of the biggest Muslim emperors who ever existed. Tolerant, accepting, and very open towards minorities. Okay? Why I'm mentioning it is because in our history books, and especially in the West, we will find that the Ottomans are described as being oppressive, especially towards the Christians, and that they were targeting the Christian minority, which is absolutely not true. We should not forget the Ottomans, we're talking about 36 rulers during the Ottoman time, starting with Osman, who was the founder of the Ottoman Empire, okay, and going all the way to Abdul Hamid and to the last ones. So this is a time period of about 500 years. In these 500 years, things happened. Bad things, good things. Like in every empire, bad things and good things happen. But what they do very often is they take a small part out of it and they say, that's what the Ottomans did to us. Look, this Sultan, he was terrible. But they don't discuss the Sultan who was not terrible. Yes, 36 rulers. Out of 36 rulers, you will not always have great rulers, yes. Okay? But that's not the essence of the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Suleiman was the longest lasting Sultan. He ruled 40 years plus. Okay, and under him, the Ottoman Empire had reached the Arabian Peninsula, all the way East Africa, the Horn of Africa. This was all once part of the Ottoman Empire. That's why nowadays, if you go to Turkey, you will find in certain areas in Istanbul, you will find black Turks. You will find Turks who have very Asian look, okay? I mean, Far Eastern look, okay? You will have Turkic people who look as if they just came from India, Pakistan. You will find Turkic people who look as if they just came from North Africa. You will find people who came as if they just came from Somalia. Okay? So it was an empire. It was an empire. This is the Balkan Peninsula. It gives you a much better idea. And you see that there are a variety of people living there until nowadays. Albanian people, as I said, are not Slavic people. Albanian people are not Slavic people. Okay? Slavic people are the ones above them. So in places such as Bulgaria, what was Yugoslavia before, so what is nowadays Bosnia, Serbia, Croatia, these are the Slavic people. They speak a common language. Then we have Greeks in Greece and in that area, and then we have Turks. The Turks are in Turkey, but there are also Turks throughout the Balkan Peninsula because of the Ottoman Empire, of course. Okay? And if you look at the blue part here, that is how the Slavic people spread. When they came to a central point in the Balkans, they spread, okay, intermarried, and developed throughout the hundreds of years a common language, a common background, a common religion, and nowadays even countries where they're just Slavic people. The Bosnian people, the Serbian people, the Croatian people, they speak exactly the same language. It used to be called Yugoslavian before, when it was part of Yugoslavia, when this was all one big country, Yugoslavia. Okay? But Serbian, Croatian, and Bosnian are all the same languages. Same thing. The Bosnian nowadays, they use a lot of Islamic terminology, you know, salah, namaz, you know. They use a lot of Turkish words or Persian words that came through the Ottomans, okay? So, which of course the Serbs don't use, which of course the Croats don't use. The Slavic people, as you see, they spread throughout Europe, okay? So Russian people are also Slavic people, by the way. But you see, there are the East Slavs, okay? People such as the Ukrainians, the Russians, Ukrainian Russians and so on. And then you have West Slavs, such as the Polish people. These are Slavic people. And then you have the South Slavs, the ones that live still in the country which used to be called Yugoslavia before, so in the Balkan Peninsula. So the Bosnian people are Southern Slavic people. This gives you a better idea of the population. About 169 million Slavic people in Ukraine, Russia, and so on. 53 million people in Poland and in the surrounding, and 23 million people around in the Balkan Peninsula. All with the same background, being Slavic people, having common languages, all the root Slavic languages. Okay? Now, Bosnia. Has anybody ever been to Bosnia? Anybody ever had the chance to see Bosnia? MashaAllah. Every Tuesday, by the way, there is a direct flight from London to Sarajevo, going and Tuesday coming back. That's the one I know. Is anything else nowadays? Has it changed? Does anybody know? I don't think so. I think that's how it is at the moment. The connection is not very good with the UK, simply because the UK and the Balkans, there is no big connection. The Balkans have a very good connection with Germany and Central Europe, Austria, Switzerland, okay? Even Northern Europe, Scandinavia, okay? You will find a very good and very close connection, you know, with the Balkan people and Balkan culture. Don't forget, Bosnia once was a colony of who? Do you know who? Who had colonized Bosnia? Not Germany. A neighbor of Germany. Austria-Hungary. Okay, the Austrian-Hungarian Habsburg Empire. They are the ones who colonized Bosnia and actually made sure that they also employed or got soldiers from Bosnia to fight for them, for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And it is so important because in 1912, Austria and Hungary recognized Islam as the very first country in Europe as being an Austrian religion, until nowadays. There is the Islam law in Austria. Have you ever heard of that? Austria, since 1912, has come up with the Islam law. The only country in Europe, and the very first one, that accepted Islam as being part of a Christian European country. Austria, 1912. So they celebrated recently the 100 years, and they were trying to cut it down. This law allows Muslims in Austria to be Austrian citizens, the imams getting paid by the Austrian government, Islam is taught as a religion at schools. Islam is a visible factor in Austria. And this came because of the colonization of Bosnia. And that's why it's extremely important to understand what's going on. Okay? And this history gives you a little bit the idea. So Bosnia and the Bosniak people until nowadays play a very big role, especially in Austria. What have the Ottomans left behind in the Balkans? Something we didn't know until recently. After the war, we figured out that, hey, I'm sure that many of you, I don't know how old you are, but okay. Now, in my time, I remember when I grew up in Germany, and we used to drive down with my parents, always to go down to Greece, and we drove through Yugoslavia, terribly big country. Okay? Very hostile, very bad. The roads were terrible. I remember how my father was cursing from day and night. You know, from the moment we arrived at the Yugoslavian border until the moment we are finally in Greece, he stopped cursing in Greece. It was a terrible country. It was a time of communism. It was a time. And I didn't know there were Muslims in Bosnia, in Yugoslavia at that time. There were Yugoslavian Muslims. Yugoslavia had Muslims, Albanian Muslims, Bosnian Muslims, Serbian Muslims, different type of Muslims. We didn't know that. I didn't even know that there was a history that was related to Islam in the Balkans, especially in Yugoslavia. Nobody knew that until the war came. And I wonder still if we have woken up, actually. We and our brothers in the Balkans. I really wonder if we have woken up. And I was just talking to Brother Ishfaq. Yesterday was the 11th of July. Have you seen any advertisement, anything? And forget the Muslim community. I mean, in the UK, in Britain, have you seen on TV anything mentioning about the genocide that happened, that has been recognized by the UN as a genocide? This is not the genocide that Piers Morgan has a problem to recognize in Gaza, okay? This is the genocide that has been recognized as a genocide in 1995. On the 11th of July, the 11th of July is the day of the genocide of the Bosnian people, of the Bosnian Muslims in Yugoslavia. The breakup of Yugoslavia between 1992 and 1995, a country that existed once, okay? Many of you might not even be familiar with this country. But it existed once, and out of this country, 7 came out. 7 new countries. And out of these 7 new countries, there were 3 who were Muslim majority, 4 who have a massive amount of Muslims. And we still don't know about it. We have European brothers and sisters who look more European than me, and I'm a double European, okay? And these are European Muslims. And we know nothing about them. I wonder, where's the networking? Where's the coming together? Bosnian people, Albanian people, Turkic people, you know, where does this, I don't see that, okay? I don't see that. And we are living in Europe. I mean, it's not news, right? Britain is still part of Europe, despite Brexit. It's still part of Europe. But we have to understand that here, they keep saying Islam has nothing to do with Europe. Europe is a Christian continent. There are Judeo-Christian values, they say, okay? They say that the history of Europe has a Christian background. It has nothing to do with Islam. That is absolutely not true. That is absolutely not true. There were countries in Europe that had become Muslim before other countries had become Christian. If you look at Eastern Europe and Northern Europe, these people, these countries became Christian after 1000, 1002, 3, 4, 5. Whereas in 711, the whole of Spain and Portugal were Muslim countries. 300 years before Hungary became Christian, there was Islam established in Western Europe. Are you aware of that? So it is extremely important to realize that. Because when they keep coming and telling you, you guys are foreigners here, you're alien. Not at all. We are not alien. Next to, of course, our converts, brothers and sisters who are enough in Europe, clear. But Islam is not something that established itself just some 40, 50 years ago. Okay? And it is a very indigenous faith in many countries in Europe. And definitely one of the most important ones, Bosnia and Herzegovina. So what have the Ottomans left behind? Ottoman Islamic architecture, the Islamic populations, as we said, Muslims who are still alive in the Balkans. Vocabulary from Ottoman Turkish or Persian or Arabic. Ottoman literature and arts. A fusion, a combination of Muslim Slavic cultures and civilizations, a fusion of Muslim Albanian culture and civilizations, and last but not least, the millet system, which until nowadays plays a role. Anybody knows what the millet system is? Not on everybody. The system of a Muslim country, of a Muslim empire, such as under the Ottomans, was like this, that everybody belonged to a millet, okay, meaning a religious affiliation. So if you are a Catholic, you belong to the Catholic millet. If you're an Orthodox, you belong to the Orthodox millet. A Jew, Jewish millet, Christian, Muslim, and so on. So the people were classified according to their faith, according to their religious background, according to their beliefs. And according to that, they were judged also. You could go to a Jewish court, you could go to a Muslim court, you could go to a Christian court. Okay? And you would be judged according to your scripture. And this system, until nowadays in the Balkans, they call until nowadays Muslims Turks. Okay? Because ethnicity was not a point at the time. It didn't go according to ethnicity. It went according to millet. So there were Albanian Muslims, there were Bosnian Muslims, there were Slavic Muslims, there were Greek Muslims. They were all part of the Muslim millet. And it didn't matter if you are Greek, Turkish, Albanian, whatever you are. It was a millet. But with the change of nation states, nowadays we have Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria. These are nation states that didn't exist before. With the arrival of these ideas of nation state, everybody had to belong to a nation. So what do they do nowadays? What did the Serbs call the Bosnian Muslims when they were killing them? Turks. They were telling them, go back to Turkey. The people have nothing to do with Turkey. You were Slavic people, have nothing to do with Turkey, nothing to do with the Turks. So there is a misconception actually that somebody who's a Muslim in the Balkan is also part of the Turkish nation. The Bosnian War happened between 1992 and 1995. Okay? Now, a lot of things happened during that time. The breakup of Yugoslavia. Of course, Yugoslavia is a massive country, as I explained. And out of this one country, 7 came out. One is not even recognized yet. Kosovo, for example, is not recognized by everyone. It is recognized by the West, but not by Serbia, for example. Okay? And it ends with the Dayton Agreement, but in that case here, the Independence Declaration of Bosnia and Herzegovina happened on the 1st of March 1992, and that's when the war actually started. The war actually started with the declaration of the state of Bosnia. As soon as they declared independence in 1992, the ethnic cleansing campaign started. Okay, especially after the Serbian leader Radovan Karadzic, and they started killing Muslims indiscriminately. The point was they did not want a Muslim nation in Europe. And you know what? If you go back to articles from that time, if you go back to understand what they were saying in English, in French, in German, and you read newspapers and articles from that time, you will see that everybody was scared of Bosnia becoming a Muslim country in Europe. A Muslim country in Europe. We cannot accept that. Actually, they were saying that. They were saying that. That was their problem. And that's why they allowed the Serbs to deal as they wanted to for 3 years. The war was going on between 1992 and 1995. Indiscriminately, they were killing women, raping women, killing children. They were having concentration camps. Nobody would stop the Serbs. Why? Because they were doing a good job, actually. Because imagine now we would establish a Muslim country with Sharia law in Europe. Imagine that. So that's why, for a while, it was going well. They had killed a massive amount of Muslims. The Muslims had no guns, nothing, because they were all part of the Yugoslavian army, right? So it was all one country before Yugoslavia. So there were people in the army, and they were all Yugoslavian people. So suddenly they had to realize, hey, we are Muslims. We are being persecuted because we are Muslims. And you know how they recognized a Muslim Yugoslavian person? How do you think they recognized him? Just by looking at them? No, they all look the same. How did they distinguish between a Muslim, a Bosnian person, and a Serbian person? How did they know that? No, they had no beards. No, they weren't even practicing. You know what they were doing? They would pull their pants down just to see if they're circumcised. The only distinctive difference between a Muslim and a non-Muslim was not their appearance, was not even their lifestyle. They were drinking. They were married to Serbian women. They were partying together. They had neighbors. They were telling, the thing is, I'm not telling you some kind of stories reading from kind of magazine or article. This is something, I grew up in Germany. My best friends were Turks and Bosniaks. And you know what my Bosnian friend told me once? He said, you know the best, I tell you one thing. The best thing that happened to my people is the massacre. I said, what are you saying? Why are you saying that, man? Why are you saying that? He said, because listen, none of our women would wear hijab. None of our men would pray. None of our people knew Surah Al-Fatiha. We knew nothing about Islam until the war came. Suddenly in the war, we received this mujahideen, Afghani mujahideen, Pakistani, Arabs, Turks, and we're like, wow, we are an ummah of people. We're not some kind of Slavic people somewhere in a corner in Yugoslavia. We are an ummah, and this feeling can just come in these circumstances. We're 30 years later, we haven't learned anything. We're still a broken ummah. Do you feel anything? Do you have anything in common with people in the Balkans? Do you have anything in common with people in the Arab world or in Turkey? Still not, no. We don't have the feeling of being an ummah. And they felt that. And I have this is first-hand reports, guys. These are people who fought there. These are people who realized that, yes, we are an ummah. We're not somewhere lost, forgotten. We are an ummah of billions of people, 2 billion people. I know it doesn't seem like this nowadays. You see our brothers and sisters being slaughtered in Gaza. You see our brothers and sisters being slaughtered in North Africa, in Egypt, in Libya, whatever. It doesn't feel like we're an ummah. But these people felt it at that time. And one of the strongest Muslim countries nowadays, I can tell you, and I've traveled a lot, one of the strongest Muslim countries nowadays is Bosnia. I tell you that, with a very European touch. But it's beautiful. It's beautiful, absolutely amazing. Not too far off, not too expensive, and still very welcoming. So, finally, the NATO intervened, by the way, in 1995, 3 years later. It took them 3 years, okay. I mean, here we still need a year probably for Gaza. You know, never know. I don't know how long it's going to take us still. We have more than 2 years already. So there, after 3 years, after a slaughter of 70% of Bosnian people, they intervened in 1995, okay? The Operation Deliberate Force, targeting the army of the Republika Srpska. That was the Serbian Republic, okay? And they attacked Serbia. And finally, the Muslims could breathe out and feel that, yes, there is some kind of help coming from somewhere. But you know why? We know what I heard from, again, first-hand report. They were saying that actually towards the end, when they signed the Dayton Agreement, when they agreed with the West that Bosnia came out as a country, the Muslims were actually winning. The Muslims were actually winning, and they were getting their villages back, and they were actually, villages were actually becoming Muslim, and other villages became Serbian, so there was a segregation. They wanted that, okay? So something was going for the side of the Muslims. It was an advantage of the Muslims. And that's when they started attacking, and that's when they started signing agreements. Okay? So Allah Alam what the truth is. Of course, I was not there at that time, not living there at that time. But from what I hear, and if you listen to people from that time who were there and who understood what was happening at the time, you will see actually that a lot of politics was played, a lot of dirty politics. Now, the central points of the Bosnian War, this is Bosnia as it is nowadays, okay, with the borders. But don't forget that Bosnia is not one country, even until nowadays. Serbia is one country, Croatia is one country, North Macedonia is one country, Slovenia is one country, but Bosnia is a country divided into Republika Srpska in the north, okay, Bosnia with the Muslims, and a very tiny point in the north which is a kind of semi-independent type of thing. So it's divided into 3 parts. One country divided into 3 parts. And that, of course, the division makes it extremely weak. And there's always problems with the Serbs in the north. Always. And they will always be busy. Always. And this is part of the agreement as well. The genocide that happened, the Srebrenica massacre, which is just the one that has come out, that does not mean that was the only one. There was not the only one. But that's the one that the UN has recognized. That's the one that the UN is even responsible for, because there were Dutch soldiers with UN helmets who were doing nothing while 8,000 plus people were killed and murdered. Okay? 8,000 plus people were killed on one day. Boys and young men. While women were raped. This, guys, happened here in 1995 in Europe. It happened in Europe. And I have to laugh when they say never again. You know, we should always know we're civilized nowadays. This will never happen in Europe again. What are you talking about? This will never happen in Europe again. Next to reality is that it has happened somewhere else before already. But it happened in Europe. Yes, in Europe it happened. And it killed Muslims specifically. And they were calling them specific names. They were calling them Turks. They were making fun of their sujud. They were making fun of them being Muslims. They were making fun of their women, So it was a specific massacre. It was a specific genocide. The result of all that was what? The Dutch government, because it was the Dutch peacekeepers, as they call them, who were working for the UN at that time, under whom it actually happened. Okay? The Dutch government resigned in 2002 because of the massacre there. They resigned. So they took responsibility actually finally. Now, the 11th of July has been now designated as the annual International Day of Reflection and Commemoration of the Genocide in Srebrenica. That was yesterday. Yesterday, the 11th of July. And I would like to finish off with some eyewitness reports to make you realize, accepted eyewitness reports, authentic, that the UN have catalogued, okay, in the archives. And if you look at that, I saw a little boy being killed by Serbs. It happened right before my eyes. The mother was sitting on the ground with the boy next to her. The Serb laid the boy on his mother's lap. Then he took a knife and cut off the boy's head. While his body remained on his mother's lap, the Serb paraded the boy's head around to his comrades. I saw a pregnant woman being slaughtered. Some Serbs stabbed her several times in the stomach, cut her open and took out 2 babies. Then they beat the babies to death. I saw it with my own eyes. The Serbs began to pull girls and young women out of the ranks. They were raped, often in front of their own mothers. A Dutch soldier even stood by and watched but did not react at all, concentrating instead on his Walkman. The Dutch soldiers ran around and saw everything but did nothing. These are just parts of them, and you can find them, by the way, not exactly the same reports, but you can find some of them on, how do I go back? You can find them online on the Srebrenica.org. Srebrenica.org, you will be able to find a lot of reports and a lot of, there we go, Srebrenica.org.uk. Okay, and that gives you a better idea. And this just was some that I took out, not to make it too terrible. Imagine, these are eyewitness reports that we're just reading. Imagine what happened during that time. And we are sitting here 30 years later, and most of us have no idea that this actually happened. It's a disgrace. And I really congratulate this masjid that they organized the day, that they took actually the time out to do it on a Saturday evening, okay, to do something like that, to remind us, even if it's just some people, to remind us of that incident. And we have to be reminded on a yearly basis, annual basis. Why have we been reminded for the last 70 to 80 years about the Holocaust? We have to be reminded about other Holocausts. That's another Holocaust that happened in Europe. So, a lot of things that have to be mentioned here. And I want to leave it here, basically. That is the last thing that I want to mention still. And I want to leave it on discussion points. First of all, what are the lessons you take from the Bosnian War or the Srebrenica massacre? Okay? Could a genocide against the Muslims happen here? How would you prepare for a similar attack? And how important is the teaching of those events at school? These questions I would like you to ponder about. And before we go on, I would like to introduce also, we have in the back my literature, my books. There are 4 of them, which I've written in the last couple of years. And they're all about Muslims in Europe and about Islamic history in Europe. So you can support my work and my research with buying these books. Furthermore, you can also take a look at my work on school, on our school site that we have, SKOOL. I'll give it in later, inshallah. And so you can actually purchase the books, or you can also support us with just following us on school.com. Yes, but first of all, indeed, the question, first question, what do you believe? What are the lessons, or what do you personally take out of, as a lesson, out of this incident, the Srebrenica massacre, or the breakup of Yugoslavia, or the Bosnian War? What's your name, brother? Hassan. Hassan put it very nicely, very diplomatically, mashallah. He's right. We should not spread paranoia. That's not the idea here. But I think still it is extremely important that we realize that all this dabi-lovey and honey and love and everything, we live next to each other and everything is fine. And the best country in the world, Sarajevo had a mosque and a church and, with the living zone. Yeah, but in the end, it was not the Muslims who attacked the Christians. It was the Christians who attack the Muslims. And it's not the first time in history, by the way, that we see that it's the non-Muslims who attack Muslims, and the non-Muslims who break treaties, and the non-Muslims who, commit massacres. It's not the first time. And you know what? It will not be the last time. Again, no paranoia, but I keep saying sleep with open eyes. Sleep with open eyes, And really, not only don't be content, but keep your eyes open, guys. Okay? No victim mentality. No, that's not what I'm advocating. That's not the idea. No victim mentality. But the truth is, you are a victim. You are a victim. That's it. And the victims in that war, recognized by the UN and the world, were the Muslims. The Muslim Slavic people who were living together with the other brothers and sisters of their Slavic people. And not only brothers and sisters, they were married to many women. I personally know people who were married to Serbian women and Croat women, and they turned against their husbands. Do you know that? I heard once a Serbian woman saying it in my face, saying, my husband, he's a Muslim. Okay, I said, so what did the war change you? She said, I always knew what they are and how they are. That's a Serbian woman married to a Muslim man, and she's telling you these things. I always knew how they were. That's how they are, she said to me. So explain to me, how were they? What's happening? I think we got something wrong here. The point is, there is a reason. There is a reason why we as Muslims have to always be aware of what's happening around us. And you know what? Islamic knowledge is not only the knowledge of the Quran and fiqh and Aqidah, which is great and fantastic and we need to know, but we also need to understand what's happening around us and to understand our history. And this is part of our history. Without understanding the history of the Balkans, the Ottoman Empire and the background, we would not be able to understand why they call these people Turks, why this happened at all. And to take a lesson, we have to draw a lesson out of that. We have to understand that really, again, without spreading paranoia, we have to sleep with open eyes, unfortunately. And don't come and tell me now this cannot happen here. Don't come and tell me this cannot happen here. Okay? That's what the Bosniaks also said in 1980. This cannot happen here. No way. We are Slavic people. You know, my wife is this. My son, we are married. Most of us were intermarried and everything. Yeah. But you know why they could live like this? Because the Muslims were not practicing. Which Muslim would marry a Serbian woman, have children with her, and the children would not know, oh, we are Muslim Serbians, Serbian Muslims. You know, what are you talking about? Are you Muslim or are you not? What are you? Not a little bit, you're not 50% pregnant, the other one you're not. What nonsense are you talking about? That's how they were talking. They were talking like this. I grew up with them in the 1980s in Germany. That's how they were talking. It's like, oh, my mother is Serbian, my father is Bosnian. Yeah, I have some Muslim blood in me. What is that Muslim blood? What is that? Are you Muslim or are you Muslim? Do you pray 5 times a day? No. You know, the only thing they had was they were all circumcised. That's it. None of them would pray. None of them would even know Surah Al-Fatiha. None of them would know Surah Al-Fatiha. Forget the whole issue of praying. Forget the whole issue of, covering and all this. Forget all that. Forget all that. This changed drastically. And that's what I gave him right, my friend, when he said, listen, suddenly we saw women, young girls. We saw suddenly young girls in Germany, where I was, and we could see them suddenly running around with hijab. It's like, what? You're Muslim? Didn't know that. Suddenly they, ponder over their religion, they go back to their history. They understand that they're actually Muslim. Subhanallah. So from that perspective, Allah knows what He's doing, guys, of course. It might seem terrible, massacre. But you know what, in the end, if you die as a shaheed, you die as a shaheed. Right? And some of us need to die as shuhada, in order to wake up. Or at least when we do it or when somebody else does it, to wake us up, the ones who stay behind. But I fear that 30 years later, I don't see really a lot of waking up that has happened. I don't see that. So any other idea with regards to question one, what kind of lessons do you take? For you personally, what is the lesson? What do you take out of that for yourself? Or question 2 then. Could a genocide against the Muslims happen here? Who believes it can happen here? Yes, please. Wow, Jazakallah khair. The brother was saying, just for everyone to hear, nationalism is a big problem. Cancer of the Ummah, actually. Absolutely, yes, absolutely, I agree. Because since nationalism became a part of the world ended in World War I and II. It was not religion, as many atheists nowadays claim. They say that religions are a problem. The religion is a problem. Religion makes you fight against each other and hate each other. Since when? Since when did religion play a role in World War I and World War II? The world wars, where millions of people died, had nothing to do with religion. That things happened in the name of religion, yes, no doubt about it, they happened. But World War I and World War II, the development in the 19th and 20th centuries in Europe and in the world had nothing to do with religion, the contrary, actually. So absolutely right, nationalism is a massive cancer. It's a massive problem. The Muslim world, even more so. Absolutely. And example again, India, Pakistan. What has happened there? You have the division, which for some people might be a good thing, because then of course the Muslims have their own country. Okay, great. They live, in a Muslim country. Okay, not under the Hindus. Great, fantastic. But now still we have like 200 million, 300 million plus Muslim Indians. They're not all living in Pakistan, right? Not really. Pakistan was developed as a country for Muslims, not only for the Muslims from India. The constitution of Pakistan was co-written by whom? It was a European Muslim, Austrian. Muhammad Assad. Muhammad Assad wrote your constitution, and I'm saying you in general. Muhammad Assad wrote the constitution in Pakistan. He was a Muslim from Austria. He had nothing to do with India or the subcontinent. The idea was exactly that, no nationalism. That was the point. But the end of Pakistan, we know, we're in 2025. No, it doesn't really work, does it? What is developing is a nationalism, okay, above everything else, where Islam plays no role. There are people in Pakistan who actually tell you it's better for us to put Islam aside like they did in Turkey. Let's become a secular republic. You know, Islam is not doing us good. Well, let's look at Turkey. Turkey is doing extremely well since they got rid of Islam, right? 1923, excellent, right? Fantastic. Okay? So, guys, honestly, is this a solution? But you're absolutely right, brother. So nationalism is a big issue, big problem. Yeah, anything else? Anybody else? So either question 1 or 2. So honestly, do you or does anybody believe that it cannot happen here? We are so integrated, right? Some of us are actually assimilated in this country, okay? They're assimilated totally in the UK or in France or in Germany. We all speak the language. We all, you know, our children go to school. They have friends at school and everything is fine and nice. So why would it happen? Something like this, could this ever happen here? I'll leave you with it. Just think about it, okay? Look at what happened 9/11, exactly. After 9/11, in America. It happened in America. Suddenly we feel unsafe here. You know, what's going on here? What's going on? You're being attacked on the street because something happened in New York. Absolutely. You know, and then something happens here, indeed, in London, and then it affects the whole of the country, and it affects the whole of Europe, and what's going on? The worst thing is what? A Muslim gets attacked, or a Muslim group gets attacked by terrorists, and then again, it turns against Muslims. It's like, oh, wait a second, we were the victims then. You know, it's crazy. Do you realize what's going on? Even if there was an Islamophobic attack against Muslims, they turn it as if it's a Muslim issue, as if the Muslims attacked. It's absolutely crazy. Again, as I said, really, I'm not propagating the victim type of mentality here. That's not what I'm doing. But where we are victims and where there is a victimhood, it has to be seen, it has to be recognized. Okay? Now, it just took them 20-something years to recognize the 11th of July. By the way, it was just recognized in 2024. Last year was the first year where officially they recognized the 11th of July as the Srebrenica massacre or genocide. 2024, that was like 30 years after the massacre, after the genocide. 30 years only. It took them 30 years, okay, to recognize the genocide. So we're talking about a genocide that's happening now in front of us. That will take another 30, 40 years, you know? Let's see. So do you see, I mean, honestly, other things can happen straight away, by the way, on the same point. Immediately. It's possible. You know, now on the spot. It can happen. But certain other things need some time. You have to understand. You know, administration, it takes long, you know. So it is something that we have to look at. How would you prepare for a similar attack? Imagine something like this would happen here. Imagine suddenly you hear, you know how it all started, by the way? How it all started. Suddenly, you know, you're sitting, you get up in the morning, you have your breakfast, you're getting ready. It was, I think, a weekend. It was a weekend, it was a Saturday or a Sunday. When suddenly you hear some kind of gunshots out on the street. It's just like, what's going on? What's happening? I don't know. Somebody shooting. I think some criminal, something happened, right? In the city center, in Sarajevo. Then it happens also in villages. People are shooting around. It's like, what's going on? What's going on? Who is shooting? What's happening? Suddenly, the Muslim communities in different cities, especially in Sarajevo, were all left on their own, and you had snipers all over. Sarajevo, if you ever go to Sarajevo, it's worth it to go and see it. If you ever go to Sarajevo, you will be able to see where the snipers were actually hiding and how Sarajevo looks. Sarajevo is like in a, you know, like in a hole basically surrounded by mountains, by hills. And the snipers had got positioned already before, long before. Another brother was telling me, for example, he said he had a very good friend, his neighbor, which was very normal, by the way, at the time, as we have here, neighbors, and our kids are playing with their neighbor kids, right? They go to school together and everything, right? They're friends. The one goes and visits the other one, okay? And he had a kid from the neighborhood, right? He was playing with him, was going to his place. The boy was going to his place and so on. And once his friend tells him, listen, we need to go. My father got positioned from his job to another city. He said, oh, that's cool, that's nice, that's fine for you. So your father's getting better paid? Yeah, that's good, fine. Okay, take care, see you then. Okay, Radan, see you. Bye, take care, okay. And this happened throughout the country. Suddenly, Serbian families disappeared from main positions, from Sarajevo especially. They were taken out of the city. This was a preparation. It was not something that happened overnight, guys. It was not something that we woke up suddenly and it happened. For the Muslims, it was a sudden wake up. It was like, hey, what's going on? But for the others, it was a preparation. It was something that was prepared long before. Long before. And then suddenly there they were. They were under siege. The longest siege ever in Europe, by the way. The siege of Sarajevo. So, really, do not fall asleep. Do not fall asleep. Keep being clear about our deen. Understand what Allah is saying in the Quran. They will be just happy with you when you become like them. And I'm paraphrasing, of course. They will be just happy with you when you become like them. And I'm not talking about you just calling yourself Joe and Mo and Ma and Mu and whatever else there is, right? Mo. So it's not only this. Because Mo, they know is Muhammad. And once they will come for Muhammad, it doesn't matter if Muhammad calls himself Mo. It doesn't matter if it's Mo or not. As long as Mo is Muhammad and hasn't changed, hasn't become Joe and John, that's a problem still. Even if Muhammad is the drug dealer on the street or whatever, they will still come for him. And that's exactly what happened in Bosnia, guys. We have to learn from that. That's exactly what happened. That was outside of Sarajevo. That happened. That's right. That's correct. The brother is saying that there was one incident with the wedding. Yeah, that is a big thing. Look, nobody can really say that's when it started on that day, but it was a big thing that made the news. True. And it was outside of Sarajevo. I don't think it was in Sarajevo. It was outside of Sarajevo. But then other things happened in Sarajevo similar to them, so that they heard gunshots and people started fighting, and suddenly there was a lot of uproar and. Yes, but this one with the marriage, yeah, something like this I heard too, yeah, that's correct, yes. How important is the teaching of those events at school? What do you think? Should we tell our children, and we spoke about it this morning actually with Ishfaq, in the Bosnia, for example, or in the Balkans, that's our people, that's my people, you will see them, they don't talk about it. They don't talk about these things. They think that if I don't mention it, it didn't exist. It's a trauma. Let's leave it aside. Our children should not know about this trauma. That's absolute nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. So they still don't teach in Bosnia. They still don't teach in Serbia, in Croatia. And if, then they just teach them that we have lost this, that was our territory, that was Yugoslavia before, blah, blah, blah. That's all they say. But they do not teach the massacre. They do not teach the genocide. They do not teach what really happened. So, again, do you really think it's beneficial for our children to know that? Would you teach your children? Would you want your teachers? Would you want your schools to teach your children? Or would this be better to not being taught? What do you think? Yeah. But wouldn't it be, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate, wouldn't it be traumatic for our children? Would you want your child to learn about massacres and genocides and this stuff? Isn't this traumatic? Would you like your children? Sorry, say it again? Excellent. Well, okay, you're somebody who grew up here, I can imagine. But you know what? Your uncles, your grandparents and parents do not believe that. They do not believe that. There is a mentality amongst the Muslim Ummah. People coming from southern Europe, from the southern hemisphere, okay? They believe really, and I'm including my people, the Balkan people and so on, 100%, it is there that they believe that really if you sweep it under the carpet, it doesn't exist. And our children should not be traumatized with that. Problem is, what is a child? Is a child 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, 20 years old? And did it not affect the children during the Bosnian War? I don't think it didn't. It did, obviously. So you're absolutely right, I agree 100%. 100%. The problem is the majority of our people will not agree with you, especially our elders. Our elders, I think, disagree. Speak in the committee. I don't know here, but if you really speak to the average Muslim, coming from the Indian subcontinent or North Africa or Turkey or whatever, you will actually find out that most of them, the elders, would say, no, 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 let's not talk about it. It's better to just let it be. It was in the past. Let this be in the past. Don't think so? Ah, okay. I hope so. Welcome. Wow. Okay. A very good discussion indeed. I think indeed there is. It's like we had COVID. There's a BC and after there's a before Corona and after Corona. Now I think incidents in the world will also be measured according to before Gaza and after Gaza. And Alhamdulillah, one good thing that has come out of it is that people, youngsters, are waking up to the reality of Israel. Okay, that there is not what they thought it was, or at least they found out that there was an apartheid state like that and a genocidal state like that, that they've woken up, because many people actually in the past, many youngsters in the past, when I was going to school, Israel was just a state, a country down there, and that's it. I mean, there's some issues there, like any country has some issues. But that was it. But I think nowadays things have changed very much, and from their perspective. So maybe, I hope you're right, that people, yes, I mean the youngsters, yeah, problem that I mentioned was the elders basically. Do you really think, have they changed their opinion as well? Or is it just something that you see with the youngsters, which there's no doubt about it? I mean, younger people or people who live now through the genocide at the moment, they also have changed their opinion, yes. Do you think the elders as well? You know, alhamdulillah, I mean, we should not forget, I came to this country in 2001. And I remember first time when I came here, I've come across a lot of Asian Muslims here, alhamdulillah, and how they were complaining about the situation of Muslims in the UK. And I was, every time we had a conversation with my wife at home, and I was saying, we came from Germany, Holland. I was like, what are these guys talking about? In Germany, we didn't have prayer places. Where I came from, there were, in the entire country of Germany, 85 million people, we had 5 mosques. In the entire country, visible mosque with minarets. Everything else was like, hidden, some Turks meeting on a Friday and whatever. I was like, what are you talking? So you come here, suddenly you see the Islamic Society. I was like, what's that? An ISOC? In King's College? What? In London? Eye socks? You see Muslims going for Salah, for Jummah. You see the women on the street. You're like, what? What are they complaining about? Now, there is a different approach here. That does not mean, of course, that everything is perfect and honey and milk. I'm not saying that. But you also you should not forget that it is worse somewhere else. Okay, on the continent it is much worse. That's why we're here, actually. Okay, it is worse on the continent. And forget France. We're not going to talk about France and Italy and these countries, okay? But really, it is much worse down there. And the freedom that is given here to the Muslims and the Muslim community, and the freedom that is taken by the Muslim community as well, is something that you cannot compare to any other country in Europe. Okay? No other countries like that. So, alhamdulillah, really alhamdulillah that we have the chance to do that, and some of us take this chance and they do that. That's good. That's great. But it could be better. Yes, it could be better. It could always be better. Absolutely. Okay? But it can also be worse, as it is. Really, when I go to Germany, after 2-3 days, I want to leave again. It's nice the beginning again, being back, but it's after a day or two, you're like, my God, it's like, you don't feel the community at all. You have nothing. There's nothing's going on, nothing. And we're talking about more Muslims, the number of Muslims in Germany is higher than it is here, but they're less visible. And they come from countries like Turkey, which is very secular, okay? Their parents and grandparents, when they went to Germany, they were secular already from the beginning. So they were not interested in Islam. So it's their youngsters now, the second, third generation that is coming back to Islam and is telling their people, their parents and grandparents to start praying. Okay? So it is a different situation, which you don't see so much here. Okay? Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Yeah. Any last comments, remarks maybe? This country once colonized 2/3 of the world. I mean, there's nearly no country that they have left out. I mean, there's still just a couple of countries, I think, you know. Oh, not at all, right? No, it was not them who gave. You know, I mean, yes, it's nice to keep yourself out of it. It's like, yeah, try to, yes. Yeah, that's a dangerous way of looking, especially for the British. I mean, they once colonized 2/3 of the world, so really, that's a very weak approach, you know. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. I mean, why would China, absolutely right, bro. Why would China accept anything from the West? I mean, come on, let's be honest now. China is the second largest economy in the world, and they're about to become the largest at all. So why would they, why would they, also politically, I mean, come on, they are, nowadays there are people watching Chinese movies, which in my time, 20, 30 years ago, they didn't exist. There was no China. What is that, Chinese movies, what's that? Now, people have become, and you have a lot of Asian influence nowadays, might be from South Korea or from Japan or whatever, which you see clearly that everything is moving towards Asia. Anyway, Europe has become already for a while a dying continent. Next to this one, we have no population anyway. There's nothing happening. And you know, there's we have a dying population in general in Europe. Even in Bosnia, there's a dying population, by the way. They're dying out. Okay, they don't fulfill the criteria for a population to grow. Yes, of course, of course. Things that are happening nowadays have never happened before. We're living in a time which I'm sure that many people said this in the past as well, but we are living in really extremely difficult times. You know how many times have I heard in the last decade that they're expecting any moment World War III to break out? Any moment, honestly. And I mean, that's something that I think anybody who looks at what's happening around us and looks at current affairs, honestly, that it hasn't happened is actually a miracle. To be very honest, I think World War III was expected to break out already 10, 15 years ago. It hasn't happened yet, which is a miracle. Okay? And I don't know where it's going to end up, but it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good, you know? But we as an ummah have to realize that we are an ummah and not nations. We should realize that we are an ummah. What keeps us together? We have to understand, we as Muslims, what keeps us together, the belief in Allah. We have there are so many things that keep us as an ummah strong. Just the prayer, the 5 daily salawat, on a daily basis together, this strength, no other ummah has this, no other religious community has this. You know, Allah makes it easy for us, but we are making it difficult, I think. It's up to us. Okay? Jazakumullah khair, really. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. The last thing now, still for the, you know, my son is in the back with my books. Whoever wants to support my work, there is a school community, school.com, World of Islamic Humanities, you can join for free, okay? And we have every Sunday, we have a lecture in English, and every Friday there's a lecture in German, and you get updates, and we have also courses and everything else. So you can take a look at the school community. It is up there, and in the back there is a paper also where you can make a photo or something. And of course the books are available. This one is about Islam in Europe, okay? Which is £30, and then the bundle of all 4 books, including the Ottoman series that I have published, is £50 for all of them. Take a look at them, inshallah. Anybody who wants to still have a chat with me can do that now, inshallah. That's why I'm going to stop a little bit earlier. I need to rush also in about 15 to 20 minutes because I have another lecture tonight. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.